All right, so today we're going to get into a Web3 business breakdown. And here on the show, as you guys understand, we really dive into projects, but we also try to take a look at the anatomy of how these Web3 projects are put together. So strategy, all that kind of stuff. This is going to be a good one because it's about Veve, and you don't want to miss it. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Metaverse Insider. Joining me today is Mr. Kyle Willson, my co-host over on the Diamond Circle Plus podcast. So great to have you in.
Hey, happy to be here today.
Kyle, we're going to get into a few things here with Veve, and a lot of it is in relevancy to what they've been doing, but also
Mhm.
maybe what they could be doing and a possible roadmap. There's been a lot within the industry really kind of shaking up with what's happening, not only with the economy, the token, but also with Veve in general, with just a lot of drama. People not necessarily liking what they're seeing in terms of growth and direction. Let's kind of just jump into it today. I know we've got some slides to review, and I want to get into the first section, and that is growth strategy. And when you look at growth strategy, every business has one, but in Web3, it's super critical because you're at essentially the epicenter of how well your business could do in the future. What are your thoughts on their growth strategy so far?
Yeah, there's a lot to take in here. Some basically pushbacks to the goalpost being moved back here, and I can pull up a few slides as well. Especially like around interoperability. June or January 22nd of last. This was a while back to
Yeah.
2021. Several different tweets here. So some of these examples of kind of slow movement, goalposts being moved out, slow development times, roadmap delays and things of that nature. So a lot of things definitely developing around Veve. They recently hired I believe, head of product management. So that's kind of a plus, but maybe they're moving a little too slow, a little too late. So yeah, interesting what they're how they're approaching this in terms of their roadmap. And again, we'll get into a lot more of that here in just a minute and basic app features as well that haven't really been fixed. We can take a look here at some of the, here's more of the interoperability and self custody, even more tweets from the community and concerns there. So, yeah, very interesting here, Paul.
All right. So with the fact that they're kind of walking back, some of the rollout, that's not necessarily new, especially in startups. I mean, that's a normal process of, hey, here's our roadmap. We think this is what we're going to do. To be fair, with a lot of tech startups, this is common. Typically, where it starts to get a little shaky is when the community, because that's super important here with Web3, starts to feel as though they've been misled. And that's the thing that I feel like is difficult for companies to overcome. What are some of the key elements that you have seen throughout your cycle? Obviously, I would consider you a Veve expert over this last, say, 18 months that you would say, hey, this has kind of gotten us a little sideways on where we think Veve is going.
Yeah, I think mainly the team saying again, going on AMAs and these tweets of kind of giving the impression that interoperability is around the corner,
Right.
and the MCP and all these different features that users have been expecting, then pushing that back further and further, and that's kind of been, I think, the struggle there for Veve. And as you mentioned, startups do have some struggle in they might run into some unforeseen, issues and circumstances or scaling issues, which I've seen before. But this has kind of come to a head with a lot of the features just not being rolled out. OUP kind of being scrapped, which was their utility
Right.
program, and kind of merged with the master collectors program, which again is fine, but the development time and the updates have been really, really slow and kind of concerning for some of the OMI holders out there as well. So.
Yeah, you can kind of see our bullet points. Obviously, the walking back point we've covered. Web3, kind of the misleading of Web3 features, I think is very critical in terms of brand development. This whole idea around self custody, this one is a problem because this gets into this whole strategy of how users would be capped on this, and then kind of this tone deaf marketing strategy. I feel like is another one that, at least when we reach out to Veve, I feel like there's just a very nonchalant approach toward building their business. Now, I get it. Startups, I've worked with founders. for 25 years, there's a little bit of that God syndrome, I feel like, in a lot of founders that are really good ones. There needs to be, but at the same point, there still needs to be an openness, especially in Web3. I feel like community is so critical going forward. So growth strategy
Yeah.
right now, what would you give them like on a A through F, score?
Yeah, it's almost an F just because I've seen the space as a whole in the macro grow and see these brands. I mean, literally build from scratch and build their IP from scratch. You're talking about the Yugas, the Doodles, all those different types
Exactly.
of NFT projects build from scratch and really build something significant. So to see them grow like this pace and to roll out features, for example, and them struggle on little things like the search bar as well.
Hmm.
It's kind of
Right.
frustrating among users who really want to go and look at, obviously these search for these NFTs. Now they did improve you can go and look up mint numbers, so that's a plus there, but they just rolled that out like just yesterday. So these are the features we've been expecting for over a year and a half. So again, a little frustration in terms of dev times, and the growth side definitely has been frustrating for a lot of the community when it seems like they just haven't been doing much on that end. So it has been
Yeah.
frustrating for sure.
And I think the other scenario that plays into this is as you look at, strategies overall in general, the elements that they've kind of missed on, there hasn't been a big communication plan on being able to, do damage control. Because I think at some point if you have a rabid enough community, if you can just give a little bit of damage control and some insights to fixing the problem, sometimes communities will be very forgiving going forward. Let's talk about execution and delivery. This is a different game right here because there's a lot of fails right here in this area.
Yeah. Again, the delays and features and the execution, as you mentioned, has been not the greatest. With them not really getting in front of some of these, like, I guess, OTC deals and things like that that haven't been built into the app, and addressing that properly and letting the community just kind of get outraged before they on the comp side of things. So I think they could definitely improve there. And again, with some of these delays, like we mentioned with the search bar and basic features that we've been expecting in the app. Master Collectors
Hmm.
Program. They teased it
Right.
early on when you first downloaded the app and rolled it back. Transfers and things like that that we have had in the past just don't have anymore, and they haven't really given any indication other than the kind of roadmap in terms of their I guess their OUP kind of roadmap um, here graphic that they've put out, which looks very almost exactly the same as last year. So again,
Yeah.
very slow dev times and kind of where they're at on their roadmap itself.
I was looking at, well, we've been looking at this for a while, is we put OMI in the CPI, which is our power index. And one thing you're going to notice here, now there's other projects, don't get me wrong, I'll zoom up on that a little bit. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of projects that have been ranking in the 30s and even down in the low 20s. But OMI has been on a significant slide for the last 6 months. Now, this has been their all-time low at 2109. They're getting ready to break 20 um, in terms of our measurement. And at that point, they actually run the risk of being delisted even from our own CPI just because one, the data isn't qualified enough. Now we're starting to see just, a terrible position for this brand overall when you look at sentiment data. Um,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about all the people that invested in this, including myself.
Mhm.
I'm a VV member. I go in, I own a lot of collectibles within the VB platform, and I'm concerned with obviously the element of how this execution has been done. Everything around it. I was looking back here at the chart or the slides. It says, constant login anxiety. This is a problem that has been built into the system, because there's no self custody, and there's a lot of distrust right now. Within these items here that we have on the slides, is there anything in here of any of these areas that you feel like let's throw them a little bit of light? Is there anything that they've done halfway good?
It's hard to say on that end. It really is. They've done some drops good in terms of edition sizes and mint numbers on select drops, but again, it's always been kind of hit and miss.
Right.
Taking a look at some of these collectibles, eyes disappearing and things like that. Quality control, that's kind of been an issue on some of these drops. Some look really well, and I'm sure they have like some studios they work with. So I'm not quite sure why they don't just use the same studio or make them all that kind of high quality we come to expect from these big brands and IPs. Again, going back to the login issues of kind of being scared of being locked out of your account, or your account being locked up, or kind of banned, if you will, if you trigger their flag, their red flag system that's supposed to stop bots, but it stops real users. So it can kind of scare users, in the app itself, and the whole self custody part. I think that also comes into play here as well.
Hmm.
We've all expected again interoperability in that self custody, and we have kind of yet to see that. So hopefully they'll get in front of some of these issues.
No, NFTs, no added utility. I think that's another, killer component here that we're like, to your point, there's so many projects out there that have been doing exactly this. They're just figuring out ways to continue to add utility to the community and also to the project themselves. And then the other aspect is just the sell pressure on the OMI token. This is what concerns me, is that there's a lot of people who have invested significant amounts of their own portfolios, and some out there have really gone all in on this. This to me looks to be those kind of markers where you see rug pulls happen. Not saying this is a rug pull, but getting to the point where we're getting a near sell pressure, sentiment data falling like a rock over the past 90 days. OMI's literally at the brink of even being delisted now, and from our own CPI. And then they're not doing anything to help posture up that token at all, in essence of strategy and execution. So I think these are some problems as we go forward. As far as the roadmap, when you look at the delays, and you've seen enough projects out there in Web3, I mean, how would you score it on this one, from an A to an F on roadmap execution?
Yeah, this is definitely an F. I typically don't see this in a space where the development times have been this slow. Typically, founders are addressing some of these issues and pretty transparent about it. And we have seen Vivi been too kind of upfront in some scenarios, but it went from all the way from being almost too much information to not literally no information on the roadmap updates and things like that from what we've seen. And again, the roadmap in terms of the utility side, it's been very poor. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of sell pressure on the token, because, you don't have any kind of utility, you don't have NFT or OMI to NFT and the underlying mechanism of the OUP program itself.
Yeah,
And that had been kind of scrapped, in general,
right.
merging with the MCP. So,
Yeah, and one of the things that we try to do here on the show is, it's not that we are trying to knock on OMI. The idea is that our audience is expecting additional research, our opinions on this, some of our own data from a sentiment standpoint. And the idea is you've got to be able to put this out there so that other projects can either avoid these pitfalls, or even OMI, or excuse me, Vivi, gets to a point where they say, all right, maybe we can fix this. Maybe we can right this ship. We kind of know, hopefully, because sometimes the voice of the community can somewhat be muted. And I feel like,
mhm.
shows like ours and others that are out there saying, "Hey, let's knock at the door and say, what the hell's going on here, guys? Let's get rolling,"
Yeah.
and get some answers. I think that's the key, hopefully, going forward. Let's talk about leadership, because this is another area that, when you look at all projects in Web3, you either have a leader or you don't. What is your position right now with the leadership there at Vivi?
Yeah, it's interesting because you have the founders, the team, and what I like to see in kind of a startup or even a unicorn or beyond that is obviously good leadership, but the ability to scale the team properly and accordingly, based on the success of it. This is a
Hmm.
platform that I would expect their, the tech side, their development side, their development team to be, scaled exponentially as the project grows and the revenue that you're generating increases. And it seems like they're just moving so slow at a snail pace. I don't know if they're kind of being cheap with their money or how much fees they, have to pay these licensors, but it just seems that they have, at a leadership level, maybe not scaled quick enough. And I think that's one of their primary issues and that they could improve on. And I know that they are trying to do that. But again, at a leadership level, you might need to approve some of these types of, scaling the employees and scaling the team. And a lot of them, I believe, are like based on contract and not actual employees. So again, these are some of the issues I think that they're facing that they can definitely improve on.
Well, that is to me the tell of a great company and or a great project is if the leadership is solid, you're going to see two things. You're going to see scaled strategy, and what I mean by that is they sit down at a table or they get on a Zoom call, whatever it might be, and they're saying, okay, here's our roadmap. Here's the strategic releases that we're going to do. Even if they're not product releases, they might be hires. They might be rollouts of particular areas of advancement within the management team or the leadership team. Even that is progress in many cases, and
Mhm.
especially in bear markets where you have to be building, you have to excite these communities. That has been one that has been really an issue. What about their priorities, in terms of what weighs in better, education on drops versus what we've seen with the rebrand, the Web3 initiative? Where do you see all of that kind of playing out, and where have they kind of broken um, in reference to that?
Yeah, yeah. I would like to them to see, obviously, like, you can see the rebrand here on their YouTube channel, and it just seems like they put a lot of emphasis on this rebrand rather than focusing on, again, those core features and utility that we kind of would have expected early on, and that they kind of sold a lot of these collectors and things like that in the space. And again, we can go over here, prioritizing Web3 people versus, quote unquote, real collectors. And again, NFT people are real collectors, and this is a $1 billion space, and it's going to continue to grow. And we've seen a lot of success in this industry. And you can see here on this, poll that was given that, NFTs, 58% of this poll over comics from Go Collect, which
Yeah.
was one of the notable brands there. So again, it just seems that not prioritizing Web3 people is kind of their struggle, and that they, have kind of neglected. And I think that's why we've seen a lot of fall off on the using or the users in the app itself.
Yeah, then you've got competition now. I mean, it's in the bear markets. This is what they should be calling is the builder markets, because this is when everybody is just pouring effort and projects into the market because they understand next step is a bull market run. And if you've
Mhm.
got a token, maybe you've got adoption scenarios that play into this. With all that, you've got Quid, Recur, obviously Flow, even Sand to a certain, Sand Rapids, even to a certain extent, all of which have been moving in the right direction. So, and it's not going to slow down. This is only going to accelerate. So I feel like this really puts Vivi at a disadvantage moving into a bull market. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, again, like you kind of hit the nail on the head there, is like you're looking at these two different collections, with the rabbits, for example. You can move around with your avatar in the sandbox, play with it. So that was a very cool drop to see. And then of course you have the VV drop, which was just static collectibles and not a whole lot of utility on the VV app itself. So again, you're having competitors like Quid, for example, with their collection and what they're doing with the sandbox and integrating their collectibles into different games. You have Hero that offers interoperability, self custody, and then you have other platforms, McFarlane as well, doing similar there. And again, just a lot of competitors moving quickly and in the space in general, and kind of showcasing that brands can be interoperable and have self custody and utility. So I would love to see these things kind of change on the VV app and have them add more utility with these NFTs that they're pushing out.
Yeah. I have some questions here that I think are, hopefully the VV audience understands, the idea behind what we do when we do these business breakdowns. Again, it's not to hate on a project and it's not to try to hurt somebody's invest. None of that. This is to hopefully make people aware of what's happening, because there's a lot of people that are signing up for VV right now for the very first time. They're starting to maybe invest in the OMI token for the very first time worldwide. This is a very active component. But if you look at all of the things that have been happening, you have to ask the questions. If you just look at Disney, why would they go in and renew a partnership here? Why? What would be the reason?
Yeah,
Not
that's I mean, that's
advancing, community is at roar. I mean, all these problems.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that Vivi has to get in front of all these issues that we brought up here on this video and address those and really deliver. And I said that at the beginning of the year is it's Vivi. This is the year that Vivi needs to deliver for them to keep these licenses and these licensors happy. Otherwise, yeah, I just don't see them continuing to bring that attractive IP. Speaking of which, like the P word, Pokemon, if
Yeah.
they are looking at this space as a whole and seeing the community kind of be outraged, they might think twice about actually, being on the app itself and moving forward in the Web3 space as a whole. So it can damage much more than just, what's happening on Vivi, but in the macro as well.
That would be critical if we saw a major IP that went into an environment like the current environment with VV, unless they've got something really hidden in terms of rollout and roadmap. I think this would be kind of pretty much a no-go going forward. Do you feel like that in itself has started to cause some problems toward maybe the Web3 poster child? Because we had VV on our own show. Let's go back here to our show. We had them right here on this top Web3 companies of 2023. And that we broke it down and said, this is the time, back to your point, these are the companies that are really they're going to make the difference. Either going to make it or we're going to see a massive explosion or a massive implosion, in some of these, because this has kind of been the scenario. Do you think they're hurting Web3 now, potentially?
Yeah, I think that's a good question to be had. I mean, the neglect again of the Web3 users and the Web3 ethos in the space, I think it definitely damages that part. And you have like a lot of infighting in the community itself. What's a real collector, what's a not real collector. And just because you do like Web3 and decentralization and interoperability, then that somehow deems you the bad guy. And I think that's not the case. I think Web3 people very much like to collect. Obviously, they love self custody because they want that ownership. And so that's where I see a lot of the, issues back and forth and maybe the team kind of neglecting that part of it. And again, the growth strategy, the delays. So at this point, I do feel like they're hurting some of their credibility in terms of Web3.
Yeah.
And again, yeah, it's definitely one of those kind of scenarios for sure.
Last point, Web3 creator community. Obviously, if you are now, because I mean, the issue of Web3 in itself, but the core issue is the creator community. That's a bigger challenge, because if you lose that, it doesn't matter what you do in Web3. This is the core of being able to grow, especially in this era right now. Thoughts on it? What
Yeah.
would they have to do to try to, stimulate the creator community again and create, a much more, positive spin on this?
Yeah, they have the VBverse around the corner in beta coming out there, but I think that they need a proper ambassador program. They don't need to ignore creators. We've seen a lot of that happen in the space. Them kind of just not even really reaching out to any creators,
Yeah.
if any. And so I think they could have a strategy around the VBverse if they roll that out properly. Time will tell on that, but again, the neglect in terms of creators in general has been pretty atrocious, and we haven't seen any type of support from them. So their VBverse strategy I think is going to be paramount for them to really have these creators continue to make content, to continue to have like that fun experience, and I think that's going to be paramount for the success moving forward for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, for sure. Cal, it's always fun kind of dicing it up here. Obviously, Web3 business analysis, we try to do as many of these as we can on projects like Vivi and others out there in the Web3 space here on Metaverse Insider. So, and I think is important in the sense of you have to understand how these companies are going about their business, but more importantly is how are they affecting the greater good of the industry and of the movement? Because right now, the movement is very, very critical. I think Metaverse has lost a lot of steam. Web3 to a certain extent has lost a lot of steam. I would almost think that I think of it like this way: had Zuckerberg just waited maybe a year and a half, it might have been, instead of Facebook Meta, it might have been Facebook AI. A completely
Mhm.
different spin on where technology is going. So it's a different world out there right now. But anyway, hey, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
You bet. All right, so you guys are tuned in, maybe on the podcast side of things. Get over here to the YouTube channel. This is where we break down these business analysis for Web3 and really kind of get into the inner workings of some of these projects, what they're doing, where they're succeeding, where they're not succeeding. This is something that, as anybody that's interested in the growth of Web3 in any industry, doesn't matter what industry you're in, food, fashion, retail, doesn't matter, gaming, film, podcasting, the future of Web3 depends on critical companies right now at the precipice of making all this happen succeeding. And if they don't, it puts a black eye on the industry. So that's something to be thinking about as you start to go in and really invest in these projects, devote your time and efforts into these projects. Watch them closely. As I say, always do your own research and dig deep. Always dig deep. If you're not in our Diamond Circle, make sure and jump in. It's very easy and free. Just click the link down below if you want to catch me. It's out there on Twitter @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on the Metaverse Insider.